You are probably sleeping on Amir, and no, not like that. She's consistently been placed in basically the bottom of almost every tier list in CZN. Most players' sentiment towards the game in terms of balances. Most characters are strong in niche situations, some are a little better than others, and Amir is at bottom tier. You'll see that in almost every tier list. But if you don't have Luke or you don't have Hugo, she is your only option for Order or the green element type damage, which is really useful in Chaos 4. And for me, I don't have Luke or Hugo, and I don't really want to play either of them, so I'm stuck with Amir for a while. So the question is, how do you play her? How do you play her as a free-to-play so she doesn't feel like trashed here? What does she need to accomplish? What kinds of builds can work with her? Can she solo DPS? And that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to explore that in depth in this video. It's been a while since I've done kind of in-depth guide, so hoping to get back into the regular swing of things. I know that's what most players who watch my content are interested in. So today we're going to talk a lot about Amir. I've probably done 5-6 runs of her over the past couple days to learn her playstyle and what works with her and what doesn't work. And with that, welcome to Amir. Alright, so first we have to look at her cards and see what she has to offer. She is a Vanguard, so it's normal that she has defense-based damage, similar to Khalippe or Maribel or whoever. She has 2 of this one basic attack, and then she also has a Steel Barrier that gives her a shield. And it's not until her 4th card, that's the first of her unique cards, which is what she starts every Chaos run with, that we really see her metallization mechanic. And you can see here, the base one gives 3 damage reduction, which reduces your damage taken for 1 swing per damage reduction, or like 1 instance of damage, and then also metallize. And metallize is the mechanic where if she has a stack of metallize, when she gains a shield, she will randomly attack an enemy and do defense-based damage. And so the idea is you get metallize, and then you either use that metallize with other cards that benefit from metallize, or you play shield cards, or you gain shield from gear or wherever else, such that she consumes the metallize to do bonus damage. And you can see here for the different upgrades, there are ones that give more metallize, counterattack. There's an upgrade option here that makes it you don't have to play this card again, and you get 1 metallization per turn. And she also has a Celestial, and the Celestial screams Khalippe as a possible option we'll talk about for pairing. And then we also have the Exhaust that gives 5 metallize. I probably wouldn't do this one unless you're blitzing, blitzing content, or you need to kill really fast, something like that. Her Metal Pierce, which is the first of the unique cards that you'll have to get through an Epiphany, is one of her cards that uses metallization to become stronger. So you can see here it's a 90 times 2 defense-based damage, single hit, or not single hit, but single target. And if you have metallization, you can consume 1 metallization to also apply to vulnerable, which is really strong. And then all the different versions, just slight variations of this. You can consume the metallization to do an extra strike and the vulnerable. You can just deal more damage for a single hit. You can always get the vulnerable regardless of your metallization state. You can potentially, like this one gets the vulnerable, doesn't check metallization, but it can cost less if you heal. I don't know why you would heal with her. And the last one, which I think is probably the strongest, gives 2 vulnerable and also 2 weaken, because weaken is a really strong stat, or a really strong debuff for enemies. Her Metal Extraction is her, 6th card, that also is one of the metallization generating cards. And you can get metallization and resolve, which buffs your shields. And there's just a bunch of different variations here. The main one to talk about is the Celestial, which is Khalippe's obvious pairing, such that you don't have to spend the AP to play this card. And then there are also ones that potentially can give up to 4 metallization here. That's 2. And then when you play 2 more, if you play 2 more skill cards afterwards, you can get up to 4 metallization in total. And then one that buffs your metallization damage here. And so, Hovering Metal and Metal Extraction give you metallization. And then Metal Pierce consumes it to deal more damage, or you can place shield cards to deal more damage. And then lastly, her Full Metal Hurricane is the one that also really benefits from using the metallization. And here this is where she really starts to shine. She can do 200% defense-based damage to all enemies. This is big AoE, and it buffs your metallization damage by 20%, and it makes it attack everybody. So suddenly, what used to be this single little dinky hit becomes a big AoE hit everybody hit. And so the problem though is that this costs 2 AP. And so how many skill cards, how many shields are you really going to be using for the rest of your turn to be able to hit everybody, right? If you can get 2 or 3 shields, 2 or 3 metallization procs, that's where this can be really strong, but that can be a little bit hard to set up. And her different epiphanies can buff the bonus damage, make the metallization hit twice, or have an upgrade that makes you automatically consume metallization at the end of each turn to deal damage to enemies, or ones that have multi-hits where this can become a significant amount of damage, especially if you get a little bit of morale. That 80 times 4 can be super strong. This 100 times 3 can become like, if you can get to a 150 times 5 because you can consume metallization to increase the number of hits, that's an AoE that hits all people, right? You can compare that to somebody like Rin, who with her mythic card, the Black Death, has like an 80% ratio to hit one enemy 6 times, right? If you have 5 skill cards in hand. You can see how Amir can seem to compete with that. Now it is a 2 AP card, so it does make sense that it's stronger, but you can see how she can do really strong damage, especially in AoE situations, especially where she has elemental advantage. And lastly is her mythic Iron Skin, which is, it's both exhaust and ultimate, but at E1 it drops the ultimate, so you can play it in the middle of your turn and get the benefit earlier. And the basic idea is for 1 turn in a fight, you can have 0 damage dealt to you. It will cost metallization. It starts at 20% and will require 4 metallization to get the remaining 80% to have 0% damage taken for that turn. But you can do it once you get her E1 and get the upgrade to it, then it will be only required 3 metallization. But basically, if you have enough metallization, this can completely nullify 1 nuke turn. And so if there's a boss that has some big nuke, you can nullify it. It's not as effective against bosses that have repeated nukes over and over, or they alternate, something like that. But for 1 turn, you can completely ignore the damage. And the nice thing is the card is gone, which means you can cycle through her other important cards like her legendary a little bit faster once you played this 1 time. And this is where I think no other unit has this type of defensive capability, right? Other units usually have 1 or 2 ways to reduce damage taken. Maybe they have a heal, maybe they have a shield, maybe they have a shield and weaken. I think Maribel has a weaken on some of her cards. But Amir has so many different ways to reduce damage. She can have damage reduction that says, I take less damage next time I get hit. She has this one that says, I take 0 damage for 1 turn, every couple turns. She has Resolve, she gets more shield. And she has, what's the last one? She does have Weaken as well, through a different epiphany. And Weaken, reduces the enemy's hits for a number of swings. And you can think about when you oftentimes die in a Chaos run, it's when you get to a boss and they start doing swings that are for like 500, 1000, super big numbers. And at that point, just having shield is not enough. And even just having shield and weaken or shield and damage reduction may not be enough. And this is where Amir is like, I have shield, I have damage reduction, I have weakness, and if not all else fails, I have my Iron Skin that I can take 0 damage for a turn. And so Amir is the premier defensive unit. She offers less in terms of other things, but she will be, I think she's better than Maribel in terms of defensive ability, in terms of the buffs that she adds. Now Maribel has stronger shields, obviously, but and shields in general are more useful because you don't take stress damage and all that. But once the enemies start doing huge amounts of swings of damage, Maribel's shield is not going to be enough in general, and that's where Amir can really start to shine. Looking briefly at her neutrals, I would say there's a wide variety of neutrals that she can go with, but none of these are exciting. There are a couple that are defense based. Like here you can do 100% for an additional hit. There's a 400% for a 3 cost that can break through shields or deal more damage against shields. But none of these scream to me she really wants them. Maybe Iron Wall for a little bit more bonus shielding. Maybe hand-to-hand combat for a 1 hit that gives you some defensive damage. This is much better than her basic attack if you were to compare it to something. And then also gives her 2 crystallization, which is shield for the next 2 turns, so she can help proc her own metallization. But aside from that, none of these scream play me. Maybe energy barrier, because you have to consider not only is the card good, but is the card worth more than one of Amir's cards, because it might take the place of her cards or one of your other units' cards, right? With deck building, we want to be very, very judicious with what we add. We don't just want to add cool things because they're cool. Heavy bash could be good, 2 vulnerable, 2 weaken for a 2 cost, but that's 2 AP and you're not doing much damage because her attack stat is not going to be nearly as good as other units. She's a defensive character. She wants defense-based damage. Devotion can be good, 100% for a 2 hit, but and for each resolve that gets a little bit stronger, but you may not get a ton of resolve on her. And so I'm not sure this is worth the whole slot, taking up a slot and preventing you from getting more metallized, preventing you from using your metallize to deal more damage. Most of these I generally would avoid, even when looking at the legendary ones here. None of these scream like this is really good. Maybe Belligerence, where if you can get rid of attack cards, you can get free draw because she would like draw. But aside from that, probably wouldn't touch these. And then the next thing is team comp ideas. So the obvious pairing, one potential comp idea is with Calippe, and that's because Calippe also has a celestial card with her Vulture Ejection. They're both, and she also has shield generation to help Amir proc her metallize. And so one comp idea I would play is Amir and Calipe, and then Cassius, which I'll talk about why in a second. But the basic idea with the Amir Calipe pairing is you get a good vulture ejection, you keep one that has shield, maybe don't switch to, I think there's an all offensive one here. Yeah, some of these remove the shield, but you want to keep the shield so that it helps proc Amir's metallization. Then you play this one. You might upgrade these two ones that are more expensive so that you can help use, have cards to use the Celestial on. And then also for Rally, I would try to get the Rally that has Celestial. This is my favorite here, so that you can use it in a giant combo where you can play up to 4 Celestial cards if you have them all in a row with just one other 2-cost card. And you can trigger and suddenly get like 10 AP of value for 2 AP in a turn. But beyond the obvious Celestial synergy, there's another synergy with Absolute Protection. And I know a lot of people but they noted that Calipe was nerfed quite a bit from the CBT. This used to be called Full Salvo. It did a ton of AoE damage. It was very, very strong. But now it's Absolute Protection, which allows you to retain all cards in your hand for 1 turn and give you a shield, but it also ends your turn. There's a couple things that this is good for. The first thing is obviously it gives you a shield, so it can proc metallize. But also you can use it. It is an X cost, which means it uses all the rest of your AP. Which means if you have 1 AP, you can get a decent shield. If you have 2 AP, you can get a bigger shield. You can use this to proc the Celestial Chain as your last card. So you can play this as a 2 AP and it will proc all your Celestials afterwards still, which could be really useful if you just need something to proc your Celestial. You may not happen to have another 2-cost card in hand. And then most importantly, this can grant retain to all cards in your hand, because a lot of times if you get the Celestial here, or you get the Celestial with either of Amir's Celestials, like Hovering Metal, the Celestial, or Metal Extraction, the Celestial, the problem is that you're not going to be able to get all the Celestials together at the same time, and these don't have retain. Calipe's Vulture Ejection, one of the benefits of it is it has retain, so you can wait until a good turn to use it and get value out of it. But the other ones, you might have to wait a turn or two and they'll be discarded. But they won't be discarded if you use Absolute Protection. You can wait 1 more turn. And so if your deck is really, really slim, really efficient, and you have Absolute Protection, it can help make sure that your Celestials kind of align, help the stars align in that sense. And so I would definitely be using Absolute Protection with Amir in that way to help her Celestials align. So and beyond those two, at that point you're going to have a lot of really AP efficient cards in that they're expensive, but you can play them for free. And that already is screaming either Nia, but I think Cassius is a little bit better as a unit that helps you grab those cards and get them in your hand, because neither Calipe nor Amir are going to be having hand size issues. They don't put a ton of cards into your hand and keep them from turn to turn, but you do want to cycle through and draw as much as possible, and Cassius is the king of draw. If you can get his Pop-Eyed Popper that lets you choose the quest, I would almost always choose the Full House, because the Full House card, when upgraded, allows you to get a free draw and cycle through your cards a little bit faster. His Joker allows you to go and pick a card, and then he has a shuffle here that is draw 3. If the total cost of those cards is 4 or less, discard them all. Now this might have some synergies with a unit like Renoa, who wants to shuffle through her cards and discard them to play bullets, but it also has a lot of synergy here, because if you're playing lots of 2 and 3 cost cards with Amir and Calipe, and you're choosing Epiphanies that are also expensive, and Celestials and 2 costs, etc., it's very likely that when you draw 3, you'll get to keep all of them. Think how good that is, getting to draw 3 and keep all of them potentially. And if you can't keep them, that's because they weren't usually expensive, so you don't usually miss them that much when they're gone, right? So this either helps you get your Celestials in your hand for a nice turn, or it helps you shuffle through other cards and get to your Celestials faster in the next turn. So I really like this Epiphany upgrade for Cassius if you can get it. His dice trick I do not care about. This is just bonus damage, but he is not a huge damage dealer. And his Devil's Dice is just draw. I would probably get the 0-cost one to help you cycle through cards a little bit faster. Maybe you get the one that's draw 2. But in short, you just want to use him as a draw machine. He can pair really well with this attack card as a neutral that allows you to choose a particular attack card and put in your hand. Usually the Vulture Rejection is a really good one, or Amir's Ultimate, or the legendary card that does a bunch of damage. Both of these are really good cards for really good targets for Cassius to use to help you get stronger turns off. And however, the obvious problem with this team comp is that the Celestial synergy that Calipe has right out the gate. Calipe has a 2-cost in her base kit, and she has her 3-cost Celestial in her base kit. She will always have that at the start of a run. Amir will not necessarily have that. Her hovering metal, you have to wait for the epiphany to make sure that you can get the celestial. And the same thing with her metal extraction. You have to wait and see if you get it from the epiphany here to get a celestial run. And so you probably won't get it every celestial or every run. You probably have to do a couple runs to make sure you get both of these. Otherwise, you're kind of dead in the water. But I think this is Amir's best comp if you have lower dupes of her, because when you have lower dupes, if you don't have her Ego Manifest that gives you her Ego Manifest 6, the 6 dupe that gives you 1 metallization per turn, you're generally going to have lower metallization values across the board. And so while metallization is a nice mechanic to get extra chip damage off of, you're mostly going to want to be able to cycle through these cards quickly to get your metallization up through the cards as much as possible. And that's why I would probably run Celestials, the Celestial build with Kalipe and Cassius, or Nia, but probably Cassius, if you don't have super high dupes of her. Now, if you do have high dupes of her and you already have a decent metallization engine, then you can be a little bit more greedy. You can take hovering metal here that starts to give you 1 metallization per turn, and now you have 2 metallization per turn, and this metallization thing does not cap. You can go up to 20 or 30 or however many you want, and now our job is just to play skills as much as possible that give us shield. And so that's where we start to be thinking about pairing with Maribel. Maribel has a couple cards that give her infinite shield. So she has this OIC that gives you shield per turn based on how much counterattack she has. So as long as you can maintain some counterattack through the turn, she'll give you shield. She also has her Woolstone here, this upgrade that gives you repetitive shield, and so Maribel can generate tons, and you know, so many of her other cards give shield. Her Ego skill gives shield. This Maribel Shelter MK3 also gives shield. There's so many ways that she can gain shield, and even if you don't play Maribel, you don't even necessarily need to. You can get shield through items. I think one of the best ones is Swamp of Judgment. What is this one called? The Lush Seaweed Armor. So this one is found in the Chaos 4 realm, which is where Amir has elemental advantage. And you can put this on any unit, and it says when you gain shield, gain another shield, which means you can proc her metallization twice. I think this is basically BIS on any unit when Amir is doing a run so that she can use her metallization. And I don't think there are other good, let me check real quick. I don't think there are other good, like there's Dormant Seas that might be a little hard to get, and there are some like one-time shields. But basically, if you see this in the shop, or if you see this on a quest event or something like that, I would put this 100% on your team. It doesn't even have to go necessarily on Amir. Somebody to make sure that you're generating more shields so that she can proc her metallization as much as possible. And you can imagine how well this will combo with her Metal Hurricane if you play this so that suddenly her hits become AoE and they deal bonus damage, or they hit an extra time, and then you play like 2 or 3 shield cards. And each time you play a shield, you're getting double the shield, and she procs like 4 or 5 metallization or something like that in a turn. You can see how this becomes very, very, very strong, but it is very specific. It's not now, it shouldn't be too hard to get this one because it is just the blue rarity. It's not the yellow or the purple rarity, but you're not going to be super strong until you get this. And that's kind of the problem with Amir. She's a little bit conditional because either she needs her Celestials and hopefully you hit them to go with Kalipe, or she really needs to get as much metallization as possible and find a way to use it. And if you can't hit this early on, you're going to be struggling early on with just being able to use your metallization. You're going to have a ton, but you're going to struggle with using it. And who I would pair with her, I'm not even 100% sure. I think Maribel is maybe the default as another shielder who has counterattack and has the shield generation for Amir. But Amir has a lot of defensive capabilities on her own. She already has damage reduction. She has, the don't deal damage at all for 1 turn. She has resolve. And so it might be that you could pair her with maybe more offensive characters, or maybe a supportive character and another offensive one. Like maybe she might go well with Orlea and Beryl. As the kind of retain combo, because Amir's not going to be taking up a ton of space. You could pair her with Cassius and Nia, and then also Maribel as well to help you cycle through cards a little bit faster. But there's just a lot of ideas. I would have to test it out myself once I get her Ego 6 to play the you have way too much metallization to work with type of build. But I'm excited to do that, but I'm a ways away from getting her E6. And then lastly is her Ego skill. I didn't mention that because it's one of the less interesting parts of her kits. It's basically a fancier version of Maribel, where you consume your metallization to gain a shield. And then after for 1 turn, and then after the turn, you gain metallization back. It's normally 3, but then at a higher Ego dupe, it goes up to 5, and it can make... It's one way to gain metallization, but it's also a way to get a nice shield for a turn. And so I'm going to make these builds real quick. Amir, Celestial, right? Where we just go Celestial, we go Celestial. And if you can dupe either of these with an Epiphany, that becomes even stronger. The more Celestials you get in your hand, the better. I would even try to get, a dupe of these and a dupe of these. This one, it doesn't matter too much. I'm particular to the Weaken or the 2-cost one, but let's go for the Weaken. And for Full Metal Hurricane, again, this is one of her best cards. Maybe go for the one that does bonus damage, but again, you can be a little bit flexible here, as well as her Iron Skin. And that's kind of her build. You wouldn't want her basics if you can get them out of her hand, and you probably wouldn't want neutrals. This is a really small, tight-knit hand. You want to be cycling through Celestials as much as possible. So we'll, and we don't care particularly about gear. We'll save this. And then the other deck would be the Amir Metallization spam, right, where we're trying to play upgrades. And that would be, if we, actually, let's clear this. Amir Metallization spam, where we are trying to get the upgrade here. I don't think we can get this twice. Or maybe we can. Actually, let me see. I'll have to test that if I can get this in game to get 2 metallization per turn. That would be very, very nice. And then beyond that, it doesn't matter too much. I would maybe take this one that gives you metallization here, but it doesn't matter too much for Metal Pierce. Then for here, again, it doesn't matter too much, but maybe the one that deals more damage. And then again, for here, we're focusing less on making the card itself be strong and more on making the metallization deal more damage. So I really like the double strike, but you could also, but you could also use the upgrade here that makes it, deal damage to enemies based on how much metallization you have. Something like this, and put her ultimate in. And then we just want to make sure we're looking for Lush Seaweed Armor as our kind of core shield gaining card to help us proc. And basically at this point, we're trying to dupe this as much as possible. Maybe we dupe this as well, her metallization, to get as much metallization as possible and deal as much damage as possible. And this will work best when you have her E6 already, so that you have lots of metallization to work with. And then your goal is just really to play shield units. And you could pair her with Orlea, you could pair her with Maribel, anybody that has some kind of shield generation, even Owen potentially, that could be super fun. So now looking at Amir's partners, unfortunately she doesn't have a lot of great partners, and most of the 4-stars don't have like super synergy with their partners. And unfortunately the 5-star partners oftentimes are specifically synergizing with a particular 5-star unit and can't be used with other ones. For example, Calipe, her Zeta partner that partners with her buffs her instinct damage, which Amir does not do. So there's almost no way for Amir to want to take that partner. Then there's another partner that buffs counterattacks, which works well with Magna and Maribel if you do a counterattack build, although that is slow. But really, I would say Wilhelmina, which is nice because the reason we're playing Amir is because she's a free-to-play option, and Wilhelmina is also a free-to-play. You can get this as a 4-star and get decent value out of the passive effect and the tactical command. I would say the passive is probably better for her. You get bonus defense, and you also deal, when you target a vulnerable enemy, you deal bonus damage. Now she doesn't have a lot of vulnerable. You could combo her with a unit who can provide vulnerable, like Calipe can provide vulnerable, and technically Amir can with some of her cards, but it's not like a huge mechanic of hers. And her eco skill is just okay. It's some extra morale, some fortitude. You can use this for a nice legendary hit when we talk about the legendary cards, but again, with 4-stars, there's not usually great partners, so I would probably pick Wilhelmina over any other one though. And then potentials, unfortunately, Amira is kind of a lost unit with these potentials. Her potentials aren't really things you're excited about. You have your random, your normal epiphany, your normal basic and neutral cards. And again, since Amira doesn't really want a ton of neutral cards, I wouldn't put any points into this more than what you need. Her basic card proficiency will add 1 metallize to the steel barrier card, which is her basic shield, which is okay for early game, but again, eventually you want to get rid of that card. And then her unique card, I would consider this actually a mistake. I should not have upgraded this 5 times, because if you look at her cards, Homegirl has 1 card with no percentages in it, another card with no percentages in it, and then her Iron Skin, and these percentages don't change with upgrades to the unique card. You can see this is always 40% and 20%. These don't change. The only 2 that it buffs are her Metal Pierce. This goes from 90 to 99% because it's a 10% increase, and her Metal Hurricane goes from 200 to 220%. So only 2 of her 5 cards benefit. Most other cards will benefit, or most other characters, the upgrade to a unique cards will benefit 3 or maybe 4 of the unique cards, but Amir really has very little benefit compared to other units. Now you might find that worth it. I probably wouldn't have upgraded to, I probably would have upgraded to 5, but it's just whatever. And then beyond that, unfortunately, like, we care about crit chance a little bit so that we can crit if you get some crit substats, like crit chance and crit damage. Her HP, she doesn't care about HP. No unit cares about HP in this game except maybe a support like Mika. Everybody else does not want this. So this also is a really sad, like, you're never going to want to upgrade this. You're just going to want to upgrade it once just to get the access to her final one, which is actually good, that buffs her metallization damage by 10% and then 20%. So this will go from an 80% to a 100% damage when you proc her metallization, and that's also like a 25% increase. It was 80% and it goes up to 100%. So this becomes pretty strong once you get this fully upgraded, but you had to go through the whole tree of a bunch of things you don't care about. We don't care. The only thing we care about is the crit chance And even here, making your basic attack deal a little more damage is not that important. For basic card proficiency, it helps a little bit in the early game, but that's about it. So I would say things are prioritized. Like we care about crit chance, we care about the last one. All the other ones, I would just be doing one and done. And then looking at Amir's options for memory fragments, she unfortunately doesn't have a lot of great options. A lot of units have one specific for their particular element. And the green element, the order element, is very much built for Luke. She can't really make usage of this because she's not going to be playing a ton of attack cards to stack up this order. And so she doesn't really have any, and she also doesn't deal a ton of damage with her 1 and 2 cost cards. She wants to deal a lot through metallize. So she's kind of mixed. She's not like Haru that's focused on 2 costs, or Renoa that's focused on 1 cost. She has a mix of a 1 cost, 1 2 cost nuke, and some skill cards that she plays, and then her metallize. So she has a lot of different sources of damage, and she won't go really well with these kind of 1 cost or 2 cost cards. So what I would build for her is I would 100% build the 2% or 2 set defense. And then I would also build the 2 set crit damage for the Executioner's tool. And then for the last one, I would just go HP for the Healer's Journey. And of course, this feels a little bit bad, but it feels bad to spread out her options here. She doesn't have a lot of great options. And so I would just go through a combination of those 3 and call it a day for Amir. And of course, beyond that, you would definitely want as much defense as you can. So you can check here what these can, this one, it's primary size defense. This one's stuck at attack. This one's stuck at health. But this one, you would want crit chance or crit damage, depending on which one you have less of. Here for the options, I would go order damage because she's not going to get order damage anywhere else. So this will help buff that. And then lastly, you would go for defense here for a little more defense as well. And then for substats, defense is highest priority. If you can get as much crit damage and crit chance as possible, that would be great as well. And then looking at her egos, again, since we got a free copy of her with the pre-registration, you'll more easily get her through E6 compared to other units. But her E1 makes it so that this is no longer an ultimate. It doesn't end your turn, but you can still only use it once per fight. So it can help for one big boss nuke to completely remove the damage. And it makes it a little better, so it requires only 3 metallization instead of 4 to get the maximum 100% reduced damage. But I don't consider that a big deal breaker or a big difference maker, because a lot of the time you're going to have shield anyway and damage reduction, and even if you only reduce 80% of the damage, you might not be even taking any of the remaining 20%. So this is really not a huge buff aside from making it not end your turn, I guess, but not the best upgrade here, honestly. Starting the battle with 2 metallize, which is really nice for stacking and making sure you have enough for using her shield, using her ultimate, using her ego skill, everything that uses it, having 2 more at the beginning is good. Upgrade for basic potentials, we know that for 3 and 5, and then skipping to 4, the shield generation from her steel resolve becomes a little bit better. So instead of 120%, it goes up to 150%. And instead of giving you 3 at the start of the next turn, you gain 5. So it becomes a stronger shield on your ego skill, and it gives you 5 back after you use it, so you can have more to work with. This was probably one of her better upgrades in my opinion, the E2, the E4, and then E5 is always just upgrades to the cards again, and then E6, where she starts to really pop off. This is where she gets 1 metallize every turn for free, and this is where you can start just playing how many shields can I get games. As I mentioned before, one of the armors in the Chaos 4 area will generate a shield for you every time you generate another shield. And so you can really easily proc a ton of her metallize with her legendary card to deal a ton of damage. And that's where I think she can really start to pop off. So to sum up everything, I think there are 2 main playstyles for Amir, and you probably prefer one or the other depending on how many dupes of her that you have. One is focusing on playing her Celestials to get a lot of value. That's if you don't have too many dupes of her like I don't, then you should play her with Calippe and Cassius, potentially Nia, but I think Cassius is a little better. So let her cycle through cards and get as much value out of Celestial as possible. And again, remember to use Calippe's, that allows you to retain your Celestials so you can use them all together. The other option, if you have her E6 already and you're getting a ton of metallization each turn, is to play her with any type of shield comp. Mirabelle stands out, but you could potentially play her with Calippe, and you could potentially play her with almost any other unit as long as you have that shield item from the Chaos 4 that gives you extra shield whenever you gain shield, so that you can generate a ton of shield and make sure you're using all of her metallization. At that point, you're probably going to want to play a lot of her upgrade cards, and her hand size will get pretty small at that point. You'll just be cycling through her legendary as much as possible, and playing other characters that help her cycle to that legendary as much as possible. And so I think both of these are going to be super fun. Once I get her to E6, I'm going to be playing more of her. I'm sure we'll get more order or green element and combatants that we can use in the future, but I'm going to be returning to this one once I have more dupes of her to, go for another run of it. And with that, thanks as always for watching, and I'm always happy to hear people's opinions if you agree or disagree, or tell me what character you want me to review next. And don't forget, you can go to czndecks.com to try out builds for yourself and share them with your friends or share them online. And with that, I will catch you later.